The wind came low and cruel across the plains, dragging sheets of snow like torn muslin over the belly of the earth. Nothing stood against it but a figure on horseback, dark hunched, wrapped in oilskin and wool, his breath frosting in the air. The horse moved slow, careful, its hooves crunching through the crusted snow, and the man's shoulders sagged as if he carried more than the weight of his coat. Behind him the sky bruised into dusk. The light sank early in that country, swallowed whole by the horizon. There was no path, no trail, only the hint of a ridge and the memory of where a fence line used to run before winter came down hard and fast. He had been riding since before sunup, chasing the faint tracks of a strayed calf, tracks that had vanished under the storm. It wasn't just the calf. It was everything. Gabe Hartwell hadn't meant to ride this far, but going back meant going home. And home was just a word now. The fire had taken the barn. Then the fever took his father. His brother had run off to the rail camps and left nothing but a folded note and a pair of broken spurs. Gabe had stayed. But the land had stopped answering. Soil gone, brittle corn died standing, and cattle with ribs like washboards. He told himself he'd hold on through winter. Now winter was holding him. A gust slammed into his side and near took his hat. He grabbed it, teeth gritted, and looked up. That was when he saw the shape, low, half buried in the drifts, tucked in a hollow of scrub and cedar. It could have been a wagon. Could have been a rock. But something about the stillness of it felt wrong. He rode closer, cautious. Then he heard it. A sound too soft to be wind. A whimper. He slid down from the saddle. His knees buckled from the cold and the long ride, and for a moment the world tilted. But the sound came again, closer this time, from the wagon. "Hello," his voice cracked dry from cold and silence. No answer. Just the moan of wind threading through the branches. He pushed back the tarp. Inside, curled like hibernating animals, were 3 children. The oldest, maybe 10, had a broken piece of stovepipe gripped in both hands like a club. His eyes were too sharp for a boy his age. One girl, younger, lay with her arms wrapped around something, bundled in a shawl. A baby, maybe. All of them looked half-starved, cheeks, hollow, clothes stiff with frost. "Where's your ma?" Gabe asked, crouching low. The boy didn't move. "She's out there," he said, his voice hoarse. "Went looking for firewood. Hours ago." Gabe scanned the trees. Nothing but white and dark and wind. "She said she'd come back." The boy's chin lifted like he was daring him to argue. Gabe didn't. He stood, rubbed his numb hands together, and looked at the sky. Snow was starting again. Small flakes this time, but steady. If they stayed here, they'd freeze. If they moved without shelter, they'd still freeze. He tied his horse to a cedar and started gathering kindling. Then he found the remnants of a fire pit and rebuilt it. His fingers bled where the cold had cracked them. He stacked brush, lit the match with shaking hands, and coaxed flame from nothing. The boy came out finally, dragging the baby in the shawl. Gabe helped them close to the fire, pulled his saddle blanket over the 2 smaller ones. He offered what jerky he had left. They ate in silence. "You got a place?" Gabe asked finally. "No." The boy's jaw clenched. "King." The boy shook his head. "How long you been out here?" "Since our wagon broke. Since the blizzard started. Ma said it was just for a night." Gabe stared into the fire. He felt the weight of the world settle on his chest like snow piling on a roof. He could leave. He should. But then the boy looked up, his eyes glassy and tired. "You gonna ride off too?" he asked. Gabe didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, he stood, stared out at the darkening woods, and took a step into them. The light behind him wavered, flickering like a heartbeat. He followed the faintest trail, just boot prints vanishing under fresh snow. Somewhere out there a woman was freezing to death. He had no plan. Just the fire behind him and the boy's words like a nail in his chest. You gonna ride off too? If this story touched something inside you, subscribe and keep walking this dusty road with us. She was less than a quarter mile from the wagon, crumpled in a thicket of rabbit brush, half covered in snow. If not for the hem of her coat catching in the wind, Gabe might have walked right past her. Her hand was curled beneath her face like she'd laid herself down to sleep, and her bonnet had come loose, revealing hair dark with ice. He dropped to his knees beside her, careful. "Ma'am," he said, breath hitching. No answer. He touched her shoulder. Her coat was stiff with cold, but her body still held the faint heat of life. He pressed 2 fingers to the side of her neck. A pulse. Barely. He didn't waste time. Slipping his arms beneath her, he lifted her as gently as he could. She was light, too light, like something the wind could carry off. Her head lolled against his chest. He gritted his teeth, set his boots to the slope, and began the slow, staggering walk back toward the orange flicker of the fire. The boy saw them first. He stood as they came into view, his body taut like a bowstring. "She's breathing," Gabe called, his voice ragged. The boy didn't move, not right away. Then he nodded once, turned, and cleared a space by the fire. Gabe laid her down, wrapped her in every blanket and coat he could find. He fed the fire until it smoked and spat and boiled snow in a tin pot to warm her hands. He didn't say much. Neither did the boy. Hours passed. The wind screamed outside the ring of heat, but inside it they held still. The baby fussed. The little girl, maybe 5, sucked on a piece of leather like it was candy. Her eyes never left her mother's face. It wasn't until well after midnight that the woman stirred. Her eyes fluttered, unfocused. Gabe leaned close. "You're safe," he said, voice low. "Your kids are here. You're warm." She blinked at him, tried to speak. Nothing came out but a breath. Then slowly she turned her head toward the boy. "I told you I'd come back," she whispered. He nodded, his chin trembling. "We knew." She closed her eyes again, but not like before. This time it was sleep. Morning came pale and brittle. Gabe stepped outside the wagon to piss and check the sky. The snow had stopped, leaving the world quiet and white. The kind of quiet that made your ears ring. The boy came out behind him, arms crossed, boots too thin for snow. "You got a name?" Gabe asked. "Thomas." "You the oldest?" He nodded. Gabe studied the kid's shoulders, 2 square eyes, too old. He'd taken up the whole world and tried to carry it. Gabe had seen that look before. In mirrors. In graves. "You done good, Thomas," he said. Thomas didn't answer. Just stared out across the flat white land. "My ma gonna be okay?" Gabe looked down, thumbed a crack in his knuckle. "I think so. She needs rest, food, warmth." Thomas looked at him then. "We ain't got nowhere to go." Gabe didn't reply. He didn't have a house, not really. The roof leaked and the stove coughed smoke. He had 1 horse, 3 cows left, and half a sack of beans. Nothing anyone would call a future. But when he looked at that boy, all spine and silence, he knew walking away wasn't something he could do. He sighed, spat into the snow. "You got any tools in that wagon?" "Shovel, hammer, some nails." Gabe nodded. "All right. First we dig out the wheels. Then we lash the axle so it don't break more than it already is. Then we wait for the sun to soften the trail and we move slow." Thomas blinked. "Where?" "Home." The boy's face didn't change, but something in his posture eased. He stepped forward, held out his hand. Gabe looked at it for a long moment, then took it. They shook like men. The trail back to the homestead took 2 days. The wagon held together with rope and prayer, each wheel groaning like it might give up for good. Gabe led the horse at a slow walk, one eye on the snow-packed road ahead and the other on the bundle of lives behind him. The woman lay bundled in blankets, cheeks still pale but breathing steadier. The baby nestled against her, too quiet for comfort but warm enough to sleep. The girl Clara Thomas had said sat with her head on her mother's arm. Thomas rode up front beside Gabe, silent but alert, as if watching for ambush. No one had said much, not because they didn't want to. They were just too tired, too used to quiet. When the cabin came into view, low-roofed, leaning slightly from wind and time, it didn't look like salvation. It looked like one more tired thing trying to stand against the plains. But Thomas let out a breath and Gabe saw his shoulders drop just a little. Inside it was no better, cold, bare, and full of shadows. Gabe built up the fire, set a pot to boil with the last of the beans, and laid the woman on the cot that had once been his father's. He didn't say so. Didn't need to. That night they ate in silence, knees touching under the table. Clara whispered to her doll. The baby finally cried a thin, hungry wail that filled the room like a hymn. It was the best sound Gabe had heard in weeks. The days blurred. They worked. That's what kept things going. Gabe took Thomas out early to chop wood, repair the barn door, check traps. The boy didn't complain. His hands blistered and he bled through his gloves, but he never slowed. Clara stayed close to her mother, fetching water, mending what she could with her small, steady fingers. The baby Sam grew louder, stronger, nursing every few hours with a stubborn will Gabe couldn't help but admire. The woman's name was Ellen. She told him one night quietly while stirring ash back into flame. "My husband died in the fall. Snake bite. We tried to make it to Kansas after. My brother said there'd be work." Her eyes didn't lift from the fire. The axle broke on the trail. Then the snow came. She didn't cry. Gabe wasn't sure she could anymore. He nodded. "You kept them alive?" She looked at him then. Her face was pale, still hollowed out by fever, but her eyes were clear. "No." Thomas did. Ellen started moving around by the second week. Not much at first. Just sitting up, helping with meals, brushing Clara's hair with slow, careful stroke. But there was strength in her, a quiet, stubborn kind that didn't announce itself. She offered to sew the ripped curtains, then patched Gabe's coat, then mended the blankets. He came in from hauling wood one evening and found her out back hanging laundry on a line strung between two fence post sleeves flapping like prayer flags in the wind. "You should be resting," he said. She turned, her hair pulled back with a strip of linen, face flushed from the cold. "I've done enough of that." He watched her for a moment. The way she moved, slow but sure, like someone determined not to owe anyone more than they already did. "You planning on leaving?" She didn't answer right away. Her fingers worked a clothespin into place. "Don't know where we'd go. You've got people in Kansas. None worth writing to." The wind picked up and the shirts on the line slapped each other like they were fighting. Gabe looked past her to the road, white and empty. "You don't have to go." She turned slowly. He wasn't looking at her. Just the line. The land. The house that hadn't felt like one in a long time. "It ain't much," he said. "But it's warm. It's dry. I could use the help." She was quiet for a long time. "Then you offering charity?" "No, ma'am," he said. "I'm offering work. Maybe company." Ellen nodded, once eyes steady. "All right. Not yes. Not thank you. Just all right." But the way she said it felt like something breaking loose inside his chest. Something good. Spring came slow that year. The snow pulled back inch by inch, retreating into gullies and shadows, leaving behind mud and the bones of things winter had buried. Trees stood bare, not yet blooming but alive. You could feel it in the ground, the slow push of life trying to break through again. Ellen took to planting. She cleared a patch of earth behind the cabin, bent over it with her sleeves rolled up, coaxing rows into the thawed soil. Gabe gave her seeds he'd saved: beans, squash, a few hardy root vegetables. She didn't ask for more than he offered. She just nodded and got to work. Clara followed her with a tin pail, dropping seeds like pebbles. The baby sat propped in a basket nearby, chewing the corner of a quilt. And Thomas, he stayed near Gabe, helping patch fence lines, oil the plow, and learn the rhythm of a place that didn't give up its rhythm easily. They didn't talk much, not at first, but they moved together, like people who knew not to ask for more than what was right in front of them. One evening after supper, Gabe was fixing a hinge on the porch when he heard the screen door creak behind him. Ellen stepped out, arms crossed to keep off the chill. Her hair was down longer than he'd expected. She leaned on the post beside him, watching the last light bleed across the sky. "I was thinking about your offer," she said. He didn't look up from the hinge. "Which one?" "Help. Company." He wiped his hand on a rag, looked up at her. "You changing your mind?" "No," she said. "Just wondering if it's still standing." His gaze lingered on her a moment. Then he nodded. "It is. The silence stretched, but it wasn't heavy. "I used to believe in second chances," she said finally. "Then I learned not to." Gabe leaned back, the creak of wood under him. "Still don't. I don't know. But I believe in work, in staying. That's a start." It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something stronger than hope. By May, things had settled into a rhythm. Gabe would wake early, start the fire. Ellen would make coffee, sometimes with chicory if they had any. The kids would tumble out of sleep in waves, Clara always first, then Sam crying, then Thomas slow and quiet like the sun rising behind clouds. They ate together, worked together. Some days were easy. Some were not. There were arguments over chores, over how much salt to use, over who forgot to latch the chicken coop. Ellen had a temper when pushed. Gabe had silence like stone. But none of it stuck. Not when morning came. One night after the children had gone to bed, Ellen sat sewing by the fire. Gabe sat across from her, polishing the stock of his father's rifle. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked, not looking up. "Sometimes," he said. "Then I remember there's nothing out there I haven't already buried." She nodded. "Same." He set the rifle aside, looked at her, really looked. "What about starting over?" This time she did look up. Her needle stilled. "You asking?" "I'm wondering if that's something we could do," he said. "Together." Her hand lowered. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "I think we already are." They built a fence around the garden together, put up a second hen house. Gabe rode into town and came back with flour, sugar, coffee, and after standing too long at the counter, fabric for dresses and shoes for Clara. When he handed the parcel to Ellen, she unwrapped it slow, held the blue cotton up to the light like it was something sacred. "You didn't have to," she said. "I know," he said, "but I wanted to." She didn't say anything else, just touched his hand, brief and warm. That night she kissed him. No words, no promises, just a long, quiet kiss by the fire that said more than either of them ever had. "Don't let the fire of this tale fade. Subscribe and keep it burning." They didn't speak of marriage right away. It wasn't the kind of thing you rushed when you'd already buried one life. Besides, they didn't need a preacher to tell them what they knew in their bones. Love, when it came hard-earned, didn't ask for declarations. It showed itself in the worn path between chores in hands, brushing at the table, in the way Ellen would pause with a towel and touch Gabe's shoulder when he came in late from the field. But the question hung there anyway, not heavy, just waiting. One evening they sat out front after the children had gone to sleep. The porch boards creaked beneath them and frogs sang low from the creek bed. The smell of fresh earth hung in the air, warm, damp, full of promise. Thomas had finished his first solo fence that morning, and Gabe had watched the boy's chest swell with something close to pride. Clara had learned to read the word hope from an old hymn book, tracing it out loud with a finger while Ellen kneaded bread. Sam had taken his first step right into Gabe's leg, then back down into a clumsy pile of giggles. "I never thought I'd end up here," Ellen said quietly. "Me neither," Gabe replied. She turned to look at him, her hair loose, touched with gold by the last of the sunset. "But I'm glad I did." He nodded. "So am I." She took a long breath. "If I say yes, it's not because I need rescuing. I don't want to be someone you keep safe." "I know," he said. "And I don't want to be someone you thank." A pause. "Then what do you want to be?" she asked. He looked out over the fields toward the hills turning blue in the dark. "Yours," he said. They married in June. No preacher. No paper. Just a small circle of stones in the yard, a clean dress on Ellen, and Clara holding a fistful of wildflowers. Thomas stood proud, clutching Sam in his arms, both of them scrubbed up and squinting into the sun. Gabe carved 2 rings from cedar plane, smooth warm to the touch. He slid hers on her finger as the breeze lifted the hem of her dress, and she looked at him like no one else had before. Like home. They didn't kiss, not then. Just stood there forehead to forehead, breathing in the same air. Later that night, when the children were asleep and the house quiet as a prayer, they lay together, not rushed, not lost in hunger, but held. "Do you think it'll last?" she whispered into the dark. "I think it already has," he said. Seasons passed. The land softened. The garden bloomed. Ellen started sewing for women in town, dresses, mending, anything they'd trust her with. Gabe built a lean-to for extra storage. They added 2 goats, a row of sunflowers, and a swing for Clara that hung from the lone cottonwood. Thomas started calling Gabe Pa one morning without warning. Gabe had turned to answer, then stopped short. Thomas had just grinned and gone back to hammering fence rail, and one Sunday afternoon Ellen leaned against the doorframe, hand resting low on her belly, a quiet knowing in her face. She didn't say the words. She didn't need to. One night in late summer, as crickets sang and the stars pressed close overhead, Gabe sat on the porch with Ellen curled into his side. "Think we'll make it through another winter?" she asked. He kissed the top of her head where her hair smelled like smoke and lavender. "We've got roots now," he said. "I reckon we will." In the distance, an owl called. The fields swayed, and inside the cabin their children slept, their breath steady as the beating heart of something worth saving. The wind came soft through the trees, and the world for once felt still,